I never thought I'd return to Greenwood Hollow. Not after what happened. The village had always been home, nestled in a quiet valley where the autumn leaves burned red against the sky and the old oak trees whispered secrets in the wind. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name, where the general store doubled as the town's heart, and where the air smelled of pine and fresh bread. But all that changed when the Henderson Initiative came. They called it a renaissance. A complete reinvention of Greenwood Hollow as the greenest, most technologically advanced village in America. At first, it sounded like a dream. Free energy, clean water, thriving crops. It was everything we could have wanted. The old factory, abandoned since the textile industry died, was transformed into a sleek research hub. Smart homes replaced the creaky wooden houses, their exteriors still charmingly rustic, but powered by unseen circuits and algorithms. Roads absorbed the energy of our footsteps, fueling streetlights that never flickered. Even the town square, once a place of slow Sunday gatherings, was now an interactive hub, its cobblestone pathways glowing softly as people walked across them. I had left Greenwood before all this. Moved to the city, chasing something bigger than small-town life. When I got word that the old place was changing, curiosity pulled me back. But when I arrived, I barely recognized it. I parked near what used to be Carter's Diner, now some kind of automated cafe where drones carried trays of coffee and pastries. The town's only gas station was gone, replaced by a sleek energy station with charging ports and self-sustaining fuel cells. Everything was so quiet. Too quiet. I ran into Thomas Wheeler, an old childhood friend, outside the general store. Except now, it wasn't just a general store, it was a fully automated shopping experience, where you simply picked up what you needed and sensors tracked your purchases. "Didn't think you'd ever come back," Thomas said, eyeing me over the rim of his coffee cup. "Didn't think I would either," I admitted. "What the hell happened here?" He gave a half shrug. "Progress. At least that's what they keep telling us." I looked around. The town should have felt alive with all this innovation, but something was off. The air carried an unnatural stillness, like a held breath. The few people I saw moved quickly, heads down, as if trying to avoid being noticed. Even the ever-present hum of insects in the trees seemed muted. "How's it working out?" I asked. "This whole utopia thing?" Thomas hesitated. "Depends who you ask." I raised an eyebrow, but before I could press, a voice behind me cut in. "You new here?" I turned to see a young woman, mid-30s maybe, with sharp green eyes and an expression that was far too serious for a place like this. She had that look of someone who didn't trust easily. "Used to live here," I said. "Just visiting." She studied me for a moment before nodding. "Maggie Sinclair. I run the Historical Society." "Still got one of those?" I asked. "Seems like everything old got swept away." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not everything." Thomas cleared his throat. "Maggie's one of the few people still fighting to keep the town's past intact. Not that anyone's listening." She crossed her arms. "You hear about the glitches?" "Glitches." Maggie exchanged a glance with Thomas. "Come to the library tonight. 8 o'clock. I'll explain everything." And just like that, she walked off. I turned back to Thomas. "What was that about?" He took a sip of his coffee, then exhaled heavily. "You wanted to know what's really going on? Show up tonight. Just don't expect to like what you hear." I looked around at the town once more. At the way the streetlights flickered, even though they weren't supposed to. At the way the trees swayed, without wind. At the way the people walked just a little too fast, as if trying to outrun something unseen. I told myself it was just a town embracing the future. But deep down, I felt something else. A village this perfect had no right to feel so wrong. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, I made my way to the Greenwood Hollow Library. It had been one of the few places in town that hadn't been replaced or modernized. The brick exterior stood defiant against the neon glow of the smart streetlights. A sign above the entrance, its paint peeling from age, still read, "Greenwood Hollow Public Library, EST 1892. Inside, the air smelled of old books and dust. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, a comforting contrast to the town's eerie silence outside. A small group had already gathered in the reading room, a handful of older residents, a few younger faces, and, of course, Maggie Sinclair. She stood at the front of the room beside an old wooden podium, a projector sitting on the table beside her. Thomas waved me over, motioning to an empty chair in the back. "Glad you showed up," he murmured as I sat down. "Still not sure why I'm here," I admitted. "But I have a feeling I'm about to find out." Maggie cleared her throat, silencing the low murmur of conversation in the room. She adjusted her glasses and looked around. "Most of you know why we're here tonight," she began. "But for those who don't, let's start from the beginning." She clicked the remote, and the projector flickered to life. An old black and white photo appeared on the wall, a picture of Greenwood Hollow from nearly a century ago. The town looked almost the same, except for the dirt roads and horse-drawn carriages. "Greenwood Hollow has always been a small town, but it has a long history," Maggie said. "Most people think it was just another New England settlement, but the land it was built on was special. The original settlers believed it was sacred, protected by something ancient." Another click. A newspaper clipping appeared on the screen. The headline read, "Mysterious Disappearances in Greenwood Hollow, 1923. I leaned forward. "Disappearances?" Maggie nodded. "Every few decades, people go missing. Sometimes one, sometimes more. They're never found. No bodies. No clues. Just gone. And it always happens when someone disturbs the land in some way." The last major incident was in the 1960s, when developers tried to expand Greenwood beyond the valley. 3 men vanished without a trace. After that, the project was abandoned. The town remained untouched until now. A murmur spread through the room. "You think the Henderson Initiative triggered it?" someone asked. Maggie exhaled. "I don't think. I know." She clicked the remote again. A recent image of the town square appeared, but something was off. The smart pathways, designed to absorb energy, had darkened, as if burned. The streetlights flickered erratically in the photo, their glow dim and unnatural. "It started small," Maggie continued. "People began noticing the lights acting strangely. Automated doors opening when no one was there. Drones flying off course, like something was interfering with them. Then came the reports of figures in the woods. Shapes that moved, but weren't supposed to be there." Thomas shifted in his seat. "And the Harvest Festival?" Maggie hesitated, then nodded. That was the breaking point. The glitch during the festival wasn't a glitch. It was a warning. She clicked again, and a still frame from the festival's digital display appeared. The grainy, sepia-toned image of Greenwood Hollow from the past, accompanied by those chilling words, "You have taken what is not yours." Silence filled the room. "This isn't just superstition," Maggie said. "The land is reacting. Something was awakened when they forced this change on Greenwood. And if history tells us anything, it won't stop until balance is restored." I swallowed hard. I had come back expecting to find a futuristic paradise, but instead, I found a town haunted by its own past. "So, what do we do?" someone asked. Maggie took a deep breath. "We need to shut down the systems. The technology. Everything the Henderson Initiative built, before it's too late." I glanced at Thomas. His jaw was clenched, his fingers gripping the edge of his seat. "And if we don't?" I asked. Maggie looked at me, her green eyes dark with something that might have been fear. "Then Greenwood Hollow won't survive the winter." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know if I believed in curses, but I knew one thing for certain. Something was very, very wrong in Greenwood Hollow. After the meeting at the library, a heavy silence followed me out into the night. The streetlights buzzed softly, their glow uneven. The air was cold, unusually so for early autumn. I shoved my hands into my pockets and started toward my old family home, one of the few houses left untouched by the town's so-called progress. As I walked, my footsteps echoed too loudly against the smart pavement, the energy-absorbing pathways giving off a faint pulse beneath my feet. The feeling of being watched crawled over me like unseen fingers tracing my spine. I told myself it was just nerves, just the weight of the meeting still hanging over me. Then I saw it. Across the street, where the shadows of the trees stretched unnaturally long, something moved. A figure, tall and thin, almost stretched, like its limbs had been pulled beyond what was natural. Its face was shrouded in darkness, but its presence was undeniable. I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, half hidden by the trees, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. My breath came in shallow gasps. I turned on my heel and walked faster. The town was silent, too silent. No wind, no distant hum of insects. Even the automated kiosks, which normally whirred softly in the background, were still. When I reached my house, I fumbled with the keys and shoved the door open, locking it behind me. The warmth of the old place should have been comforting, but instead, it felt wrong, like something had followed me inside. I exhaled, trying to shake the unease. Just nerves. Just stress. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas. Did you see it? I hesitated before typing back. See what? 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. You know what? You're not the only one. I swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure what to say. Before I could reply, a soft creaking sound echoed through the house. The floorboards. Something was inside. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dark corners of the living room. The house was old, sure, but it had never made noises like this before. My mind scrambled for an explanation. The smart grid? A draft? My own paranoia? Then the lights flickered. Not like a power surge. Not like a simple malfunction. They flickered in a pattern. 3 short bursts. A pause. 2 longer flashes. A pause. Then 3 more short bursts. I watched, heart pounding. A message. A signal. I didn't know Morse code, but I knew when something wasn't random. Then, from the dark hallway leading to the back of the house, I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Faint. Indistinct. I stepped backward, pulse hammering in my throat. The air felt heavier, thick with something unseen but undeniably present. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the whispering stopped, and the house went completely dark. I stood frozen in the pitch-black silence, my breath the only sound. My phone vibrated again. A new message from Thomas. Get out of the house. Now. I didn't hesitate. The moment I saw Thomas's message, I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock in the pitch-black house. My breath was ragged, my pulse a deafening drum in my ears. Then, the whispering returned. This time it wasn't faint. It was all around me, slipping through the walls, the floorboards, the very air itself. It wasn't a voice, it was voices, layered over one another, indistinct, murmuring, pleading. I threw the door open and stumbled onto the porch. The street outside was wrong. The smart pathways pulsed erratically, their glow shifting from warm amber to a sickly green. The streetlights flickered in chaotic patterns. The air itself seemed to vibrate with something unseen. And then I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing motionless in the streets. Some half hidden in the shadows, others in the eerie glow of the malfunctioning streetlights. They weren't real people. They were distorted, their shapes flickering, glitching in and out of existence like corrupted data. I turned to run, but Thomas's truck screeched to a halt in front of me. Get in, he shouted, leaning over to push open the passenger door. I didn't need to be told twice. I jumped in, slamming the door behind me. The second I did, he floored the gas, tires screeching against the pavement. What the hell was that? I shouted, twisting to look out the back window. The figures didn't move. They just stood there, watching as we sped away. Thomas's jaw was tight, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Maggie was right. It's the land. It's fighting back. And if we don't shut it down tonight, none of us are making it out of Greenwood Hollow. Shut what down? I demanded. You keep saying that, but what does it mean? Thomas's eyes flicked to me, then back to the road. The Henderson Initiative. Their technology. It's built into the town. The smart grid, the roads, the power stations, it's all connected. We cut the power, we break the link. If we don't, whatever's been awakened here is going to consume this place. My skin crawled. You sound like you've known this was coming. He didn't answer, but his silence was enough. We swerved onto the old mill road, the one place the Henderson Initiative hadn't touched. The trees here were denser, the darkness deeper. The smart road had ended miles back, and now we were on old cracked pavement, littered with fallen leaves. Ahead, the factory loomed, the heart of Greenwood's transformation. What once had been an abandoned textile mill was now a high-tech research facility, humming with artificial life. We kill the power at the source, Thomas said. That should. Before he could finish, the truck died. The headlights cut out. The dashboard went dark. The engine sputtered and fell silent. Thomas swore, twisting the key in the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. We walk from here, he said, pushing open his door. I hesitated, glancing at the trees around us. Watching. Waiting. Then I followed him. The factory's security was minimal after all. The system itself was supposed to be the defense. No guards. Just automated systems that were no longer responding properly. The front doors were already open, hanging slightly ajar. Inside, the facility was a maze of dimly lit hallways, the emergency lighting flickering ominously. The air smelled sterile, metallic, but underneath was something else, something rotten. Power rooms this way, Thomas said, moving fast. As we turned a corner, the whispering started again. But this time it was screaming. The lights strobed violently, casting shadows that moved on their own. Figures flickered in and out of existence. The same distorted shapes I'd seen outside, but now they were closer, reaching. Move! Thomas yelled, shoving me forward. We burst into the power control room, slamming the door behind us. The panels flickered erratically, the screens displaying unreadable symbols, not human, not machine, something between. Shut it down, I shouted. Thomas grabbed the main breaker and yanked it down with everything he had. For a moment, nothing. Then, the entire building screamed. A deep, inhuman wail echoed through the facility. The walls trembled. The lights burst, plunging everything into darkness. The air rippled, like reality itself was tearing apart. Then, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then, one by one, the emergency lights flickered back on. And the figures were gone. Thomas exhaled sharply, slumping against the wall. Did it work? I wasn't sure. But the air felt lighter. The ground felt solid beneath my feet again. The unnatural stillness that had plagued Greenwood Hollow was fading. We stepped out of the factory. The streets were empty. The sky, once a sickly hue, was clear. Stars twinkled overhead, as if the storm had passed. We walked back in silence, past streets that no longer pulsed, past homes that no longer whispered. The town was just a town again. As I reached my old house, I turned to Thomas. Is it over? He hesitated, then gave a small nod. For now. I didn't like the sound of that. But for the first time since I'd arrived back in Greenwood Hollow, I could hear something I hadn't noticed before. The wind. The rustling of leaves. The distant chirping of insects. Life had returned. I took one last look at the factory, now nothing more than a dark silhouette against the trees. And then I went inside, hoping, praying, that the past would finally let Greenwood Hollow rest.